So are we ready to do the thing here? We're going to talk about choosing a specialty.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I want to make this as personal as I can. And I had originally planned to have no slides at all. But when I told my family what I was going to be talking about, my son, who is a gastroenterologist, sent me a slide that I could not pass up. So in fact, I had my daughter-in-law make a trifold poster. I was going to have a physical poster for this, which I have in my car, but it's no good on Zoom. So I was going to have a physical thing for you all to see, but I did my best to take a picture. So I'm going to try to share the content, because this is one of those things that I think is hilarious, but hilarious because it gets so close to the truth. This is not the take home, but this is the warm up, and I think it's helpful. So let me see if I can get it on here properly. Okay, I'm going to expand it up as much as I can. Can you all see that?
Yeah, I've seen this. It's awesome.
So for people that have I think did I have some of it go off the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, I apologize. At the top, it has the medical student, crazy or sane.
Yeah.
And if you're crazy, you go to the left. That's where the attention span question is. And then if you're sane, you go to the right where the hardworking is. So I took a screenshot, and apparently this little photo line up at the top wrecked my screenshot a bit. So, I hope I don't mean to disparage any specialty at all, but I've certainly had colleagues who were psychiatrists that were really quite different. And also good friends that are in emergency medicine, and they kind of have the ADD thing like I do, and it's pretty helpful in their field. In my field, my ADD is an asset, and I think it's an asset in emergency medicine, because you change tasks so frequently. Anyway, you guys hopefully had a chance to look at that a little bit. I can put that back up later if you want. I can send it to Stan if anybody wants it. But I wanted to.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, I have it on my screen. Do you want me to share it?
Yeah. Do you have the whole thing?
Yeah, I have the whole thing.
Was my sharing at least working? Just
yes.
The thing cut off? Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry I didn't diagnose that it was cut off at the top.
Can y'all see that?
So I'm sure all the students here are sane, probably, although some may want to be emergency doctors, and we'll see about that. But I think the the splitting of the sane into hardworking and not so much, I think, is entertaining. I call it something else, but it actually, there's an actual thing about how much work you're up for. Part of the thing that I think is really helpful in the whole process of thinking about a specialty is it's really important to understand who you are and what kind of a difference you want to make in the world. So why don't we take it off? I want to be able to see faces. One of the things that I think, is it possible to take it off, Stan? Yeah. There we go. One of the things that I think gets neglected is a longer term view of how you want to look at your professional life when it's over. What kind of a difference did I make in the world? What kind of stewardship did I have of the gifts that God gave me? And one of the things that I pretty much never hear people consider that I think is very valuable and ought to be considered. And it's just my opinion. There are a lot of ways to skin this cat. I'm picking a specialty, but I think it's worthwhile to ask yourself, what doctors have you known who you admired, and why did you admire them? And think about what that really means at a deep level. You know, there's a verse that is a watchword verse for me that ties into this, that I use in my own thinking, and I used in the rearing of one of my children. This became my verse for Carol, my daughter, and me. Luke 12:48, from whom much is given, much is required. And the reality is, all of you guys are gifted, and you can use those gifts to make lots of money and have an easy life, and you can use those gifts to serve. And I'm not saying that people that have specialties that are easier don't serve, but our society needs doctors that care about the sick. And the other piece of that process about who do you admire, one that I think is really helpful and certainly factored into my thinking, is all of you have relatives or loved ones who you care about. And one of the things I suspect that you don't want your mothers to run into is all the doctors of your generation want to be dermatologists, so there isn't anybody to take care of them when they're sick. And this is getting to be a bigger and bigger problem. People going through medical school don't want to take care of the sick. And it sounds like a preposterous thing. It's not. It's a huge deal. Medicine residencies and pediatric residencies go unfilled every year now, and they have for a good 20 years. And good primary doctors are hard to come by. It's one of the most common questions I deal with patients. Well, I'm on Medicare. I can't find anybody who'll take me. And to me, that is the responsibility of the medical profession. And now here I am. I'm a specialist, right? I'm not a generalist. But I mean, I work a lot of hours. I work too many. I'm not saying do as I do in that regard. I've got to figure out how to rein myself in. But I will tell you that as a physician with a specialty that is a high energy, hard work, long hours, lots of responsibility kind of job, I have found it to be unbelievably rewarding to me personally. And there are lots easier ways to make money than what I do. Lots. Now, people in my specialty today make a lot. When I was a fellow and when I chose GI, I had absolutely nothing to do with it. Since I went into practice, the extent to which my profession is lucrative has changed fourfold. So it was never a part of my calculus. It's kind of been accidentally, kind of ridiculously remunerative for me the last 20 years. But I think to achieve real fulfillment as a physician, you really are better off making the best possible use of your gifts to serve your community. I think, it's hazardous to say things like this, but I think God expects a lot of us because we're bright, we're good scientists, we're talented. Hopefully we're good with people. Some of you will have good hands. Some of you will not be able to put an IV in somebody to save your life. Don't become a surgeon if that happens. Some of you, though, will be fantastic with your hands, and the world needs good general surgeons and cardiologists and GI doctors, and we don't have an easy life. It's a hard life, and I wouldn't sugarcoat that. But it has been unbelievably rewarding to me. I take care of people in their darkest hour, and I take care of people when they're doing great. But being somebody who takes care of people in the darkest hour, you want that for your mother. You want that for your dad. You want that for your siblings. You're going to want that for your kids. And the trend in medicine over the last 25 years is massive overrepresentation in the specialty search for things that are easy and pay a lot. And it worries me in in a macro sense of the whole country, it worries me. But for us in particular, because of the idea of Luke 12:48, which I think is a solid concept from the New Testament, I think there's moral hazard to picking that approach. And I know that there are, the counter argument is about family, and I get all that. But being a physician is a sacred trust. And, people don't send me their parents to take care of them because they know I have good work-life balance. That is not why people send me patients. They know I'm going to give everything for their mother or their father and not worry about myself. That's why. And it's rewarding. I'm not saying it's easy to maintain a balance. It's hard. But I hope that some of those things on the poster, people who are hearing this will at least start to think about in a different way. The reward of really caring for the sick. I'm as passionate about that today at 66. I got 3 more weeks of 66, so I'm barely still 66, that I had 40 years ago. None of that's changed. In fact, if anything, it's deeper, because included, layered into that, is long-term relationships with my patients. And I just finished doing my morning procedures before driving over here to the office to do the Zoom. And what a treat it is to see my patients who've kind of been through the wars with me, and we got them on the other side. And they're so appreciative, and we really did get to help them in a time of severe crisis. And it's an honor and a privilege to do that. But it is hard to do that. That doesn't come easy, but it is incredibly valuable. And I think it's becoming progressively more underappreciated today. So my hope is that, I'm maybe the only voice you hear on this subject. But my hope is that you, as you pick specialties, you at least factor into it, what does my giftedness enable me to do for people in need? One of the very coolest things about being a doctor to me is that, we are called as Christians to serve. And I have a job where I get paid to do it. I don't have my job life, which I do to support my family, and my home from work life, where I do my family and my service. I do my service and my job at the same time. It's an amazing thing. And patients look at their relationship with their doctor as a sacred trust. Believe me, I've been a patient a couple of times in very desperate situations. And, I thank God that there were people who were willing to have a harder life to rescue people like me. And it made me more glad that I have the kind of job I have had all these years. So I'm probably saying it too much, but that idea, I think, is critically important and not talked about nearly enough. Another thing, this is an easy thing that you guys are going to think of on your own, but I do want to at least admit that I think about this. I think it's valuable to pick something that you're intensely interested in intellectually. And most of you don't have to be told to do that. Although sometimes people pick specialties for personal reasons and not for intellectual reasons, but you guys are used to having a rich intellectual life, and you're going to have a lot less fun in life if you don't have a challenge. If you're able to master what you do professionally pretty quickly, it's going to be very disappointing as a lifestyle. My daughter-in-law is a pediatric gastroenterologist, and early on in her fellowship, we had a really multi-hour sit down because she was incredibly frustrated that she hadn't mastered everything yet. I mean, she was losing her mind over the frustration of not being great at being a pediatric gastroenterologist. And she asked me, how do you deal with that? Because when you were a fellow, you weren't great yet, and how do you deal with that? And I said, Catherine, I thank God that I wasn't great when I was a fellow. I thank God that I picked a job that I'm going to have to grow with every single day and be challenged by every single day for the rest of my life. Do I want to know everything and get everything right every time? Yes, but medicine's too big for that. So I think the best thing we can do is be as prepared as possible, and then see absolutely to it that we learn something important every day. So you get better and better and better. If you could master the job in 6 months, what a miserable job for somebody with a good brain. I mean, it would be terrible. And so I think it's important to pick something that'll be intellectually stimulating and challenging, and something you can grow with for a lifetime. I think it's wise to pick something that you have exceptional skill at. As time went by during third year and fourth year and internship, I realized, wow, I'm better with my hands than my colleagues. I'm teaching my colleagues how to do LPs. I'm teaching my colleagues, this is when I was a third year student, how to do IVs, how to do central lines, all kinds of stuff. It came to me well and relatively easily compared to others. I'd always been a handcraft kind of a guy, and I've liked the personal relationship so much. I expected to do internal medicine, especially where you talk to patients, not a procedure specialty. But I could tell the more procedures I learned, I was just getting better and better and better. And when I was moonlighting as a resident, and a patient came in with a gunshot wound to the chest, and the thing is sucking, there's blood everywhere, and I get to put in chest tubes, man, I'm digging it. I'm not happy he got shot, but I'm, if he's going to get shot, at least it was when I was on call, and I got to go take care of the guy and save his life. And it's fantastically rewarding. And I don't avoid those challenges, embrace them, figure out what you are likely to grow with for a lifetime, and jump on it. One of the things you're going to have to face, and your generation is going to face this very differently than mine, but you're going to have to decide whether you want to be an owner of a business or you want to be an employee. Lots and lots of private practices are getting bought in whole or in part by private equity companies, and practices that used to be owned by the doctors, run by the doctors, owned by a hospital or an insurance company or a private equity group out of New York or whatever. And it's very different from owning your own business and running it yourself. I run our business. It's incredibly hard. I spend 25, 30 hours a week in addition to my 45, 50 hours of patient care a week. So I have a lot of hours. But it's also very gratifying, because as a doctor owning a practice, my interest is the patient. And when you're an employee, you got a layer removed. The business is owned by somebody else. You think about your job and your hours and your shifts and stuff like that. And that's just not how I look at a day ever. I don't think about a day like that ever. And I love not having to think about it that way. So that's one of the things you're going to have to think about. We've been through a lot of these issues with private equity companies. There's a lot to talk about there. It's more businessy oriented, but you are going to be stuck having to learn that, I think, and you should start to prepare for it. And then one of the things that I mentioned at the planning conference, I need about 5 minutes. Am I okay, Kyle? Is this 5-10 minutes? We okay? Okay.
Yeah, plenty of time.
Okay. Nobody has to tell you to go do something that you like, but there are a couple of things I want to caution you about. One is, don't assume that practicing a specialty in the medical school is the way it is to practice the specialty. as a very hazardous decision. And it could make you stay away from things that you would really love and gravitate to things that you're going to hate. And because the nature of practice in a med school setting is just really, really different. And it really starts in medical school. I remember thinking when I was at your stage and thinking about specialties and went through pathophysiology, I thought, well, what are the most interesting diseases, right? And there was a time when I thought the kidney diseases were the most interesting diseases. They're phenomenal. I love the fact that I can pronounce glomerulonephritis, which it's so interesting. And then so there was a time when I knew I didn't want to do GI, which is what I ended up in. I was 100% sure not GI, but in my internship, I thought, yeah, I could do renal. Those diseases are fantastic. And when I took my first renal rotation, everybody's really cool illness had turned into chronic dialysis, which was an incredible service to those patients, but it was not the slightest bit interesting. Nephrosclerosis ends up in chronic dialysis. Acute GN ends up in chronic dialysis. Goodpasture syndrome may or may not end up in chronic dialysis. And so the period of time when the diseases are interesting can be kind of brief and disappointing. And now I think, again, what I was saying before about service, running a dialysis unit, immense service, keeping those people alive and giving them their lives back. I think it's an immense service. It was very boring to me. That doesn't mean I'm trying to say don't be a nephrologist. I'm saying the disease being interesting is a piece, but it's not the whole thing, because the disease being interesting and the practice being interesting are quite different. The other thing that can be quite different is worth doing some genuine experiential research on is I'll never forget my second year residency, I had a rotation on the service that we called liquids. So we had, we had cardiology and GI and renal and all that, but we had one service was called liquids, the other was called solids, and they were both oncology services. And the solid service did solid tumors, lung, breast, colon, etc. And the liquid service did clotting disorders and acute leukemia primarily. And we had 29 beds on the service. We had 3 residents. I was the head resident on the team, and a wonderful attending and a fellow. And back then, they did not allow the nurses to push platelets, and we had 20 people with catastrophic thrombocytopenia from chemotherapy all the time. And so, your lot in life, if you're the resident on call that night, which was every third night in those days, you spent the night pushing platelets and seeing new crash and burn leukemics all the time. I mean, it was just an unbelievable physical beating. But it was one of the most interesting services I was ever on. I had a fabulous attending. He had an eight-headed microscope. We'd look at I learned how to do bone marrows really well. I loved doing bone marrows. The other residents, students hated doing them because it's kind of creepy shoving a 6-inch needle into somebody's pelvis, but I love that stuff. So, it was great. And then I got to go look at the slides and know the clinicals. We knew them at a cellular molecular level. We knew them in a personal way. I loved it. Had a great time, but I've never been so tired, except during COVID. I've never been so tired as I was that rotation, because it was, the man worked 120 hours a week that month. And I thought, this is fascinating. It's awesome. And I don't think I could do this for a living. How could I possibly do this? But this is my favorite example of how the medical school practice, outpatient practice, or not outpatient, but the real world practice is totally different. Lots and lots of the leukemics in town in Birmingham, Alabama, would get sent to the university for their leukemia induction. And the oncologists in private practice weren't giving people daunorubicin and Ara-C and driving their counts down to 0 for a month and trying to keep them alive. That was getting done at the hospital, where we had residents and fellows like me to take the beating for a month at a time, which a person can do, but not for a lifetime. It's just not a lifetime kind of job. And I really loved all the intellectual. I loved the diseases. I loved the patients. I really got into the whole thing, but I didn't think I could live like that. And my attending really liked me and thought I would have a great time as a hematologist, oncologist. And he asked me about it. And I said, I've had as much fun on this rotation, anything I've ever done, but I can't live like this. I mean, I don't know how you do it. He said, I attend on the liquid service once a year. That's how I do it. Plus, you're the one staying up all night, not me. But I said, yeah, but how does anybody do this in practice? I mean, if you go out into practice, there's no residents to bail you out. He said, yeah, but you send the patients to the university for stuff like this. He said, this is not what my life is like. I enjoy this as a diversion 1 month a year. He said, look, I need you to follow me around for a day in the clinic and meet all the patients that I see that I've been taking care of for 10 years who've never darkened the door of the hospital. When you work in a university setting, you see the people who get hospitalized. It's a tiny fraction of HEMONC, tiny, tiny. So you've learned a lot about the whole liquid thing, the really severely ill people. And I know you enjoyed that. But the outpatient practice I have is much more like what private practice is like. And it's a blast. I love it. It's fantastic. And I think you might not like it, but you might. So you need to find a day to follow me around before you rule out HEMO. And I thought, that is really smart. It's really good advice. It makes a lot of sense. So it was hard to do in the day of the 100-hour week back in the day, but I found a day where I could get permission to go shadow him for a day. It was amazing. I had such a great time. And I said, I can easily do this for a living, easily. And so within a month, I'd applied for my HEMONC fellowship and had that all arranged, and everything was great. And I was going to be a HEMONC doctor and extremely happy about it. I was quite sure it was the right call until I took my GI rotation. Oh my gosh. And I realized that the Luke 1248 thing kind of applied because HEMONC, you don't use your hands for anything. It's all brain. And I love that part. But, up until then, I really thought that every specialty was either a hands specialty or brain specialty. And for the most part, there's not much overlap. The general surgery surgeons, it's much more of a hand specialty than a brain specialty. And I'm not saying surgeons are dumb. Some of my best friends are surgeons, but seriously, some of my best friends are surgeons. But an internist does very, very little in the way of hands-related procedures. And part of what I fell in love with GI and cardiology is that they're both hands and brain, and I love both things. GI is a lot more brain stuff than cardiology is. Cardiology is too cookbooky for me. But I've had a cardiologist save my life twice. I've had 2 heart attacks. I got rescued with acute caths and stents, once in 2006, once in 2019. I had a heart attack while I was skiing and I had to drive myself to the hospital. And so I appreciate what they do. That doesn't mean I can do it. I love the procedure part of cardiology, but it wasn't intellectually stimulating enough for me. GI is just 100 times more interesting. And to me, and so, I went through this process of thinking I wanted to do multiple different things. And it actually helped me to kind of go to every new rotation and say, oh, this month I'm on renal, I'm going to be a nephrologist. This month I'm on general surgery, I'm going to be a surgeon. This month I'm on OB, I'm going to do OB. And then see how much you can get out of it and how hooked you can get. And then whatever you're the most hooked on, that is, you gotta take that as a significant part of your equation where you evaluate what your options are. But just to summarize, all those things, pick something that's going to matter so that when you're my age, you don't look back and say, well, I made a lot of money, I had a lot of off time. That's great, but did you make the kind of difference in the world that God really prepared you to make? And that's something, to me, I think that's a big piece. It's been a very big piece for me. Pick something you can stay intellectually interested in forever because it'll stay stimulating. You'll love it. The last thing I want to mention is I did mention some to the medical students who were at the planning conference. I kind of hate mentioning this, but this is probably the most important piece of advice I'm going to give you. So I feel like I need to do it. Every specialty has what I call a dark underbelly. There is a subset of patient problems that even the people in the specialty don't like. They just don't like seeing that patient, or they don't like taking care of that problem. But that is the tar baby that sticks to you in that specialty. Every specialty has it. For cardiology, it's squirrely chest pain. For orthopedics, it's low back pain. And there is some aspect of every specialty that you will not like. And as time goes by, you will come to like less and less and less and less. And I think in general, when people are picking specialties, they don't pay enough attention to identifying the dark underbelly of the specialty and making sure that it's something they can live with. Because just like in a marriage, you get married for all the positive reasons, and you're so in love, you don't think about the negatives about your spouse or the way you are when you're with your spouse. You don't think about those things very well. And because of that, what happens is over time, the good things about your spouse you take for granted, and the bad things get bigger and bigger and bigger in your mind. And the same thing happens with a specialty. You marry your specialty. And so it is really important to know what the dark underbelly is and make darn sure you don't pick a specialty where you cannot stand the dark underbelly, because you will like it less with time. You're not going to fall in love with it later. It will get darker, and it needs to be something that doesn't make you crazy. So for me, it was the pulmonary patient, the COPD guy that won't quit smoking. And you've had him on a respirator for 6 weeks. You save his life. You extubate him, and he says, "Can I have a cigarette? I just want to kill that patient." When I was an intern, why am I sacrificing my life to save you, and all you want to do is kill yourself with cigarettes? What the heck is wrong with you? That is a terrible reaction. I admit that that's a terrible reaction, but that's still what happens in my head. Now, what I can't explain is why when I rescue the drunk who's bleeding from esophageal varices, and he finally becomes conscious because his hepatic encephalopathy wears off, and he says, "Can I have a drink?" I don't know why that doesn't bother me just as much, but it doesn't. And I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink at all. But it doesn't. I'm not saying it isn't annoying. I mean, you sure don't want people to live that way. But that dark underbelly in my specialty just didn't bother me very much. And I'm surprised because I have alcoholics in my family, and it just drives me crazy. But it didn't bother me with the patients as much as the smokers. So I just had to stay away from pulmonary. I wasn't going to fix myself. So I like pulmonary, but I couldn't take the smoking. It was just more than I could stand. So figure out what the parts are that you can't stand in the things that you're considering. And it's almost as important to pick the dark underbelly that you hate the least as the specialty that you think you like the most. Because 20 years later, the dark underbelly is going to affect you more about how you feel about your specialty, probably than the parts you like. So take that into account. Try to take that into account. I think that's important. So those are I think a question went by that I didn't
Yeah,
see.
I think somebody had just messaged and asked if you could repeat the part I clarified with them. I think they wanted to hear a little bit. I think they might have gotten here a little bit late. Just what you were talking about with the passage from Luke.
Oh, okay. So the passage from Luke is Luke 12:48, and it says, "From whom much is given, much is required." And in this day and age, I've seen progressively over the last 25 years a strong trend toward physicians picking specialties that have easy schedule, lots of money, low responsibility. You go home and you're home. And I think it's not wise to fail to use your gifts to the max to serve. I think my belief system is that that's what the Lord expects of me, and I don't think I would have ever been happy if I hadn't done a hands-oriented specialty and a brain-oriented specialty, because that's where my gifts are. And I think from whom much is given, much is required. And for me, that means to use those things in a way to serve. Now, the specialties where you do procedures like I do, early up in the morning, long days, that's part of it. But it's very rewarding to me personally to feel like I'm serving the way I'm supposed to. And serving in a way that just gives me an easy life and makes a lot of money, I don't think that's has any chance of having the kind of gratification that I experience every day. And I wish people wanted it more. And I think they'd be happier. I think a lot of the reason that we hear so much about young people burning out, going, what are you burning out when you're 40 years old for? I've been working 80 hours a week for 40 years and I'm not burned out. Why are you burning out in 4 or 5 years after you're out of school? And I think it's because people pick things that don't mean enough to them. They've used way too many personal life reasons for picking what they do and designing their life. And it's just not rewarding. You've done all this work in school to give you a chance to become great at something that really matters. And then you pass it up. So I apologize if that sounds harsh. I certainly don't mean it in a harsh way. I just think that the trend toward non-full utilization of gifts is a disturbing trend. And I think it makes us miss out on the service that God prepared for us. And I think that's a bad call. I think that leads to unhappiness and lack of contribution that you won't be proud of when you're my age. And I don't want that for anybody. I want everybody to pick something where they make such a difference in the world. You know, I mean, I'm sitting here at 66. I need to retire. It's ridiculous that I do what I do, but I am so gratified by the contribution I've gotten to make to the world. You know, it means a great deal to me, and it's been hard, but you know, it's kind of cool that it's hard also. So anyway, that's what I was saying about 1248. Did that cover it, Kyle? Do you think? Stan, looks like I'm getting thumbs up over there.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
that
pretty
sounded good.
like
Does anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
questions, anybody? Now's a great time to ask.
Sorry, we're not in person. I was looking so forward to in person.
Well, we all were. So
Well, this isn't gonna last. The Delta's not gonna last all year. It's spreading so fast. It'll burn itself out here in the fall. Enough that they're not gonna keep shutting stuff down, I think.
well, I hope you're right.
Well, the numbers have peaked. You know, I don't know if you guys know what an RT is or not. You know what RT is? It's a replication factor. So it's the number that's used to express how many people get infected by each infected person. And if it's greater than 1, the epidemic is growing. In the early phase of the epidemics with Delta, the RT, both in Britain and the United States, has been about 1.2. My practice is in South Lake, so it's in Tarrant County, and I literally track this Tarrant County data every single day. But the RT had gotten up to 1.26, 1.28 on a day-to-day basis through the summer. The thing was just growing the epidemic was growing like a weed. We're down into the low 0.9s. It's been going down for a week. I think the numbers that people are reporting of infections are massively underestimating the size of the epidemic because people have kind of lost their mojo for getting tests. So we're not, you know, people are getting sick saying, oh, heck with it, I don't, you know, whatever. And they're just not getting tested. They don't want to get quarantined, and they're not, you know, especially vaccinated people are getting sick and they have COVID and they're just not getting tested at all, but they are able to spread Delta in a way they couldn't spread the wild type virus. So it's going to burn out. I don't know when, but it will have markedly falling rates this next month. But we're going to have months of endemic spread because this sucker is flat out contagious, and it's going to keep getting people sick. But it won't stay, you know, 6,000 a week diagnosed in Tarrant County. It's already peaked. it looks like in Tarrant County, starting to come down slowly. We're still high numbers, but it's coming down.
Yeah. Well,
So for you guys, I'm just hoping against hope you get back to in-person school. It's so much better. And what we do every day is such an intensely personal thing with the patients. The more time you spend doing people, the better. The key to making a diagnosis in a patient is the history. And, this is not how you do it. It's not what makes people engage. It's hard to diagnose people on the phone. So much easier in person. So I hope you guys get back to it soon.
yeah.
Dr. Lacey, you probably would have been sick watching us do our mock OSCE virtually through
Your mock
AI.
what?
Our OSCE, our standardized clinical encounter. It's kind of just a graded history and targeted physical with the patient, and we
You're
had to
doing it
do
on
one.
Zoom?
Yeah.
No, not even. It was with an AI system. It gave us a list of like preset questions, and we had to go through and pick which ones we wanted to ask.
Oh, well, don't even start me.
Oh,
It was pretty tough.
I'm glad they had something for you, but you got to see real patients. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. You guys familiar with the WashU manual for clinical therapeutics? Everybody has carried around in their pocket forever. Anyway, you will be when you're an intern. Well, the WashU manual is produced at my medical school, and the chief resident who did the every 3-year edition when I was a second-year student really became a mentor to me, and in my second year. And he introduced me to a patient named, I guess it's not HIPAA violation, there's no HIPAA back then, but he introduced me to a guy named Bud Kuna. And he told me before I went in to see Mr. Kuna, this is like 1978, and I have this vivid a memory of it, but he said, now Bud has ulcerative colitis, we think, and he's got polyarteritis nodosa. These are both uncommon illnesses, especially the PAN, and he's a good historian, and you're never going to have an opportunity to take a history from uncommon diseases from this good a historian, 2 of them in the same patient. Do not waste this. So when you get done, you take a really detailed history, ask him every single thing you can think of, go home and read about it, both diseases, and let Bud become the diseases in your head. So do the history, do the physical, go home, read about them, come back, do it again. And then maybe do it again. And at the end of that, you will have a memory of UC for your lifetime that Bud gives you. You're not going to get it from a book. You're going to get it from patients, and let them become the diseases for you. It's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. I'll never forget his description of his symptoms of the PAN. Of course, it's all his UC is all muddled in because I'm a inflammatory bowel disease expert. So, I've seen thousands of patients with IBD, but the PAN, you don't see very many, even in a lifetime. And man, I learned so much from that patient. And you got to see him. I don't remember his words. I remember his hand gestures for how he described the lancinating pains that went down his iliac arteries, into his femoral arteries. And but I'll never forget it. And I've used that knowledge in diagnosing other patients many, many times. And so the in-person is important. I care about it for you guys. I hope to goodness you get back in the hospital, the building, the sooner the better.
Well, we're really praying and hoping that we can even do a medical mission trip like next spring break, like next March, because these guys did not get a chance to go on a mission trip last year or the year before. And so, like,
of course, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So on a mission trip, every med student gets hands-on with at least five, 6 patients a day.
Yeah, they could take histories.
Yeah.
Do physicals. It's
all
huge.
Day, all day. Yeah. And they didn't even get a chance to do that. So we need to pray. Yeah. It's just yeah.
Well, I hope that this was at least somewhat helpful in some ways for you guys. I've tried to focus on the pieces of advice that I wish I had gotten instead of having to figure it all out myself. And I hope that's helpful. I do want to say that I'm available. I've had a lot of students over the years contact me after, and if there's ever anything I can do to help you guys, I'm more than interested in that. Really care a lot about the experience you guys have clinically in training, the kinds of doctors you become, how rich your life is because of the service you do. It's just hugely important, and it animates my concern for students more than any other thing. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great year in spite of how it's getting started.
Yeah,
I think it'll turn around much faster than last year did, but we'll see.
thank you. Yeah, and Dr. Daniels is actually a cardiologist. So
Cardiologist. So James, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you go. Did I say anything too terrible?
No, because you were talking about the interventional cardiologists, and I totally agree with you. They never use their brains. So I'm actually an electrophysiologist, and so we actually have to use
that
our
was
brains.
my favorite part of cardiology.
Yeah. So also another specialty where we get to use our hands.
Yes.
And our
I'll tell you,
quite a bit.
that specialty really tempted me. That really tempted me. But there were so few people who got EP fellowships. I was really worried I'd end up being a radiologist. And again, there's nobody who appreciates the cardiologists that saved my life more than I do. But appreciating them and wanting to be them are not the same. And,
totally agree. And likewise, I have no interest in poop, so I'm really glad that you do what you do, because I just never do that.
Well, that actually helps keep our business a robust business. The fact that it isn't charming or it's not nearly as disgusting as you think it is, because we scope people when they're clean. If they're dirty, I quit.
Right. Yeah.
But we do, I think, as specialists, we get to cheat in the sense that most specialists have one organ and take care of a couple, 3 things all the time. And I have 7 organs, and they get sick a lot of ways. And I never have an afternoon of all the same thing, ever.
Yeah.
And one of the things I told the students at the planning conference is one of my great joys in life that I didn't see coming was that at least once a month, I see something I've never seen before. And I've been out of school 40 years. There is so much variety in my specialty. It's really been a fun thing for me. I'm not trying to sell people on GI. I'm just saying that's something that I'm passionate about, and it's been really great for me. I came that close to not being a doctor over poop and vomit, though, James. That's what made me not want to go to medical school. I decided to go to medical school as a senior, and I knew for sure that GI was the one thing I would never consider. I was a 3rd-year resident when I had my first GI rotation, and I was long set up to be hem-onc, and I had no idea I was going to like GI. I was so astonished at how much I loved it. So I think it's important to get a broad experience, give yourself a chance to like a lot of things. I mean, you've ended in something, when I was in school, James, EP was kind of in its infancy. We had tools for pacing people out of tachyarrhythmias. We had tools for inducing arrhythmias so that we could figure out how to pace them out and which medicines you could, was it procainamide or quinidine or whatever. Now, obviously we have amiodarone now. It's a very different world, but that was so interesting. I had a rotation where I got to work with an EP guy for a month. It was just out of this world great. I had such a wonderful time, but it's not for everybody. I don't know your hours exactly, but you got long hours. I know you do. It's a hard job.
Certainly, especially on procedure days, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the chance to share with you guys.